The awakening hall of District 9 smelled like rain that had never touched the ground. 10,000 of us stood in concentric rings around the prism, a column of living glass that rose from the floor to a ceiling so distant it dissolved into white haze. Every citizen of the grid stood here once, on the first dawn of their 16th year. Or, for the rare late bloomers and the unregistered, whenever the Bureau finally caught up with them. I was 27 by the count of my old life and something like 4 months old by the count of this one, and the Bureau had caught up with me fast. They always catch up. Above the crowd, colors were igniting one by one. A boy 3 rings ahead of me lifted his hand to the prism, and the air over his head bloomed white. Pure, blinding white, the color of the ruling houses. The hall roared. Officers in silver coats were at his side in seconds, wrapping him in a ceremonial cloak, already speaking the name of whichever house had won the lottery of his blood. After him, a girl, yellow, the color of builders and engineers. Polite applause. A merchant family somewhere just became middle tier for 3 generations. Green. Green. Blue. Yellow. Green. The grid ran on this. 1 touch, 1 color, 1 life, sorted and shelved. The prism read the architecture of your soul, its density, its ceiling, its maximum theoretical output, and painted your entire future above your head in a single second. There were no appeals. The glass did not lie, they said. The glass had never met anyone like me. I had 4 months of this world in me, and I'd spent them the way I once spent night shifts, listening, cataloging, building a map of the machine I was inside. I'd woken in a relief shelter in the flood margins of District 9 with a grown man's body, a stranger's face in the water barrel, and a head full of a life that had ended on Earth. Kairos Vale, 27, emergency dispatcher, 9 years of headset and other people's worst nights. The shelter wardens assumed flood amnesia. It was common enough in the margins that there was a form for it. I signed the form. I ate the gray ration paste. I learned to read their script off soup labels and warning signs. And I learned the world the way dispatchers learn a city, by its emergencies. And the grid, I learned, was a world made entirely of emergencies that had been filed instead of answered. Classification wasn't a caste system exactly. Caste systems at least pretend to be about blood. This was cleaner and colder. The lattice field, the vast energy membrane that kept the sky lit, the crops growing, the monsters of the deep world out, was woven from human soul output, and every soul was an instrument in the weave. The prism simply measured your gauge. White souls anchored the field, and so they ruled. Yellow and green and blue souls fed it, each at their station, and were housed and ranked accordingly. And a soul the prism couldn't read at all was not a mystery to be studied. It was a snapped string in the loom, a hole in the ceiling. 4 months of listening, and I'd heard the phrase Protocol 7 exactly twice, both times in the lowered voice people use for cancer and debt. Nobody would say what it was. That, more than anything, told me what it was. I could have run. I'd thought about it, lying on my shelter cot, with the honesty of a man who has watched many people decide whether to run. But the grid registered everyone eventually. The census sweeps were seasonal, and the margins were swept first, and a man with no color above his head could no more hide up here than a hole can hide in a lit window. Running just meant being tired when they found you. So I walked in on my own feet, and I stood in row 41, and I watched the colors bloom. And I did what I have always done at the start of a bad call. I breathed out and got curious. Row 41, the archivist's voice said, from everywhere and nowhere. Approach. I approached. Up close, the prism didn't look like glass at all. It looked like water deciding to be a pillar, and inside it, threads of light moved with the slow patience of things that have sorted 1 billion souls and expect to sort a billion more. I put my palm against it. It was warm. That surprised me. Hello, I thought, out of old habit. The habit of a man who had spent 9 years on the other end of an emergency line, greeting every voice the same way, no matter what was screaming behind it. Let's see what you make of me. The prism went dark. Not dark like night. Night has depth. This was the flat, matte, total absence of a mirror that has stopped believing in light. The gray of dead glass. The color a window would turn if it forgot what it was for. And it didn't bloom above my head the way the other colors had. It leaked, spreading across the ceiling haze like ash dissolving in milk. And everywhere it touched, the white light of the hall guttered. 10,000 people stopped breathing at the same time. Subject, Kairos Veil. Classification, none. Read error. Directive, Protocol 7. The words hung in the air above me, visible to every soul in the hall, in the cold official script of the grid itself. I didn't know yet what Protocol 7 was, but I watched a mother in the second ring grab her daughter and physically turn the girl's face away from me, the way you'd shield a child from an open wound. And I understood the shape of it. The silver-coated officers who came for me did not bring a cloak. They processed me in a room without corners. The walls curved into the floor and ceiling so smoothly that the chamber felt like the inside of an egg. Bureau of Classification, Sub-Level 6. I sat in a chair that was bolted down, which told me everything about the people who usually sat in it. The officer across the table was young for the weight she carried in her shoulders. Dark uniform, silver thread at the collar, an emblem of a closed eye over her heart. Her file tablet identified her, in letters I was still slowly learning to read, as Classification Officer G. Holloway. State your name, she said. Kairos Veil. Origin District. You tell me, I said. Your people found me in a relief shelter with no memory of arrival. That's what the intake form says. I've read it upside down 4 times while we've been sitting here. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile, but a muscle that remembered smiling. She flattened it. The prism returned a null read on your soul architecture. Do you understand what that means? It means your glass doesn't have a shelf for me. It means, she said, that as far as the grid is concerned, you do not exist. And things that do not exist inside the field. She stopped herself. Recited version, unclassifiable individuals present a destabilization risk to the lattice field that sustains all districts. Protocol 7 mandates their removal from the field. Removal to where? She looked at me for a long moment. She had gray eyes, which struck me as a strange joke on somebody's part. The gates of the abyss, she said. I'd heard of them the way you hear about the ocean floor. The abyss was the wound at the bottom of the world, the place the lattice field couldn't reach, where the light of classification didn't hold. Monsters were farmed there by licensed raid teams. Criminals were dropped there instead of executed because the fall was cheaper than the rope. You're not going to appeal, she said. It wasn't a question. Her stylus had stopped moving. Most of them scream by this point, or bribe, or pray. Would any of it work? No. Then I'd rather spend my last hour above ground being pleasant company. I nodded at her tablet. For the record, Officer Holloway, your glass isn't wrong. It just isn't finished. There are architectures it was never taught to read. And you'd know this how? Because I died on a highway on a world you've never heard of, with someone else's blood on my hands and a stranger's pulse coming back under my fingers. Because I remember the dark between that life and this one. And something in that dark looked at me the way your prism just did. And unlike your prism, it didn't look away. Call it a feeling, I said. She held my eyes a second too long for procedure. Then, instead of pressing her thumb to the tablet, she set the stylus down. "Off the record," she said. The recording sigil above the table was still lit, so it wasn't off any record at all, and we both knew it, and she said it anyway. 4 months ago, a gnoll came through this room. A woman. She screamed for 6 hours. Last month, a boy. He offered me everything his family had, which was a boat. You've been in that chair for 50 minutes, and you've asked me 1 question about your own execution, and 4 about how the prism works. Her gray eyes didn't blink much, I'd noticed. What were you before the shelter found you? What kind of person does your architecture belong to? The kind that answers phones, I said. There's a job where I'm from. When the worst moment of your life arrives, you call a number, and a stranger picks up and stays on the line with you until help comes. Car wrecks, fires, children not breathing. 9 years of it. I nodded at her tablet. You'd have been good at it. You're doing the second half of it right now, staying on the line with someone whose help isn't coming. Her jaw did something small and involuntary. That's not what this is. Officer Holloway, you've stalled my paperwork for 50 minutes. Where I come from, we call that exactly what this is. For a moment, the room without corners was very quiet. Then she picked the stylus back up, because the grid was watching, because her own color hung above her head like a rank and a leash, because the ceiling is a kindness, and everyone under it has somewhere to fall from. For the record, she said, voice level again. Subject displays no destabilization behaviors. Recommendation, reclassification review. A pause. Recommendation overridden by standing directive. Protocol 7 confirmed. She pressed her thumb to the tablet, and somewhere below us, machinery began to move. She didn't look at me again. That, too, I recognized from the other end of a headset. The particular stillness of someone who will be hearing this call again at 3 in the morning for the rest of their life. They held me until dusk in a cell of gray alloy, and I passed the time listening to the building. Pipes, ventilation, boots in corridors, and under all of it, everywhere, a hum I'd been hearing for 4 months and had stopped noticing. The way you stop noticing your own heart. The lattice field. The loom of souls, running day and night under everything, fed by everyone. In the cell's silence, I finally heard how strained it sounded. A machine running long past its service date. A note stretched thin. I filed that away with everything else I couldn't use yet. They dropped me at dusk, which I appreciated. If you're going to see the sky for the last time, it should be doing something worth remembering. The gates of the abyss were not gates. They were a mouth, a ragged, continent-cracking absence in the earth, ringed by 7 concentric walls of black alloy and the humming towers of the lattice field. All of it built not to keep people out, but to keep the dark in. Transport platforms extended over the edge like diving boards over the throat of the world. Wind came up out of the deep, warm and wrong, smelling of rust and lilacs. There were 4 of us on the platform. 2 convicts, shackled, one weeping and one asleep on his feet, in the way of men who had run out of everything, including fear. A bureau chaplain, muttering the litany of measurement, from color we come to color we return, with the enthusiasm of a man reading a parts list. And at the rail, in a white coat that turned the dusk pink, a spectator. He was my age or younger, beautiful the way statues are beautiful, with the white classification sigil floating in soft holography above his collar. A house scion. He watched me the way ornithologists watch a bird that has landed outside its recorded range. So you're the null, he said. Damien Ashford. I sit on the protocol oversight board. I wanted to see you myself before disposal. Kairos Vale. I'd shake your hand, but I raised my shackles. You're calm. He tilted his head. The gray ones usually aren't. Do you know why we do this? It isn't cruelty. The field is a ceiling. It holds the sky up over 40 million people. A soul the field can't read is a hole in that ceiling. One hole, small, but holes spread. He said it gently, with real conviction. And that was the moment I learned that the most dangerous people in any world are the merciful ones with clean math. The ceiling is a kindness, Vale. Even for you. Especially for you. A man with no ceiling has nothing over his head to keep out the rain. Where I come from, I said, we called that the open sky. He studied me a moment longer. Then he made a small note in the air with one finger, some gesture his house interface recorded, and stepped back. Drop the null first, he said. The platform tilted. I want to be honest. I was afraid. Calm is not the absence of fear. Calm is just fear that has been given a job. As the floor swung out from under me and the warm wind of the abyss swallowed the light, my fear's job was to keep my eyes open. So I kept them open. And falling, down past the reach of the lattice, down through dark that got thicker and older and stranger, I finally heard it. The thing the prism's silence had been hiding. A voice, or the memory of a voice, unrolling across the inside of my skull in script no one else had been able to see. Kairos Vale, rank 0. Origin, foreign. Architecture unreadable. Talent granted, boundless summoning. Ultra mana, 10/10. Skills, soul analysis, level 1. Contract forging, level 1, uncapped. 10 little points of mana and no ceiling anywhere in the record. Not high limit, not S grade. No entry in the field where the limit should be. The grid hadn't failed to measure me. The grid had measured me perfectly, written down what it found, and then thrown me away because the honest answer terrified it. 0 was never emptiness. 0 was what their instruments displayed when the number ran off the end of the scale. The dark came up to meet me, and for the first time since dying, I smiled with my whole face. All right, I thought, falling into the mouth of the world with nothing over my head at all. Let's find out how deep this goes. Chapter 2. 0 is not empty. I did not die at the bottom, for the excellent reason that there was no bottom. There were ledges. The abyss, it turns out, is not a well, but a wound. It descends in shelves and terraces, in petrified forests of black coral the size of cathedrals, in slopes of ash that catch a falling body and bleed off its speed a bruise at a time. I came to rest on a shelf of warm stone under a sky that was not a sky, and lay there doing the first job of every survivor, counting what still worked. Arms, 2. Legs, 2. The left one loudly unhappy. Ribs, complaining but structural. Above me, perhaps a kilometer up, the last light of the lattice field made a faint silver scar across the darkness. The underside of the world I'd been thrown out of. Below me, a soft, breathing dark, lit here and there by veins of blue-green luminescence running through the rock like the ghost of a river system. And everywhere, the drifting lights. I'd taken them for embers at first, or insects. They were neither. They hung in the air at the edge of vision, pale motes the size of a held breath, drifting against the wind. When I looked directly at one, my new skill woke up without being asked. Soul analysis, level 1. Untethered soul. Fragmentary. Fading. Souls. The abyss was full of souls, hundreds visible from this one shelf alone, thousands of faint sparks deeper down, a snowfall of the dead that never reached any ground. Convicts, greys, fallen raiders, and older things. Souls with shapes my skill flagged only as foreign era, record lost. The grid burned its dead up above. Everyone knew that. The ash went into the fields, and the soul went back to the color, whatever that meant, and nobody asked where the pipes led. But here they all were, snowing down the throat of the world. "It's not a disposal site," I said out loud to nobody. My voice sounded small and sane, and I needed it. "It's a drain." Something answered. Not a voice, a pressure. Far below, so deep that the blue-green veins faded to nothing, something vast turned over in its sleep, and every drifting soul mote on my shelf shuddered in the same direction at once, like iron filings when a magnet rolls past under the table. Then it passed, and the snow drifted on. I decided, with the firm executive clarity of a man whose leg was possibly fractured, not to think about that yet. Instead, I performed triage on myself, because the first rule of every disaster is that you are the first patient you can reach. I splinted the leg with 2 struts of dead coral and strips of jumpsuit, and it went about the way self-splinting goes. I'll spare you the sounds I made, except to say the abyss heard all of them, and, worryingly, some of the dark answered in kind. Then I inventoried the shelf. The warm stone stayed warm, which meant heat came up from below, which meant I wouldn't freeze. The blue-green veins shed enough light to move by. The trickle sounds in the coral meant water existed, quality unknown. Shackle cuffs. Steel. Heavy. The chain between them a weapon if it came to that. It was a survival situation, and survival situations have a merciful narrowness to them. You don't have to fix the world. You have to fix the next hour. The next hour tried to eat me. It announced itself as a light, a soft amber glow drifting up the shelf toward me, pulsing in a slow, sweet, regular rhythm. And I was 4 steps toward it before I understood that I had stood up and started walking without deciding to. The rhythm was in my pulse. It was in my breathing. Some deep brain floor of me had decided that light meant, rescue meant, safety meant, go. And it had simply taken the body and gone. What saved me was 9 years of professional distrust of exactly that floor. Dispatchers learn one law before all others. The calm voice is not always the true one. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, and the pain snapped the rhythm's grip a half second. And in that half second, I threw myself sideways behind a coral trunk and looked at the light indirectly, the way you look at a dim star. Around the sweet amber pulse, the darkness had teeth. A lot of teeth, arranged in a spiral, at the bottom of something that was mostly throat. The lure bobbed twice more, patient, and then drifted away down shelf, fishing for softer instincts than mine. "All right," I said quietly to the abyss when my hands had mostly stopped shaking. "Lesson filed. Everything beautiful down here is a mouth." The abyss, in its way, spent the next day teaching me the exceptions. I thought about water next, and that's how I met Ren. I found a trickle coming down a coral wall, licked it off the stone like an animal, and had my face fully in the wall when a voice above me said, "That one's got razor eels in it, 3 pools up. You'll be dead by tomorrow." I turned around slowly. Sitting on a coral branch, weighing a hooked pry bar in one hand, was a boy of maybe 14, hollow-cheeked, quick-eyed, dressed in a patchwork of raid team cast-offs, with a gray classification brand seared into the back of his left hand. Not hovering holography like Ashford's white sigil, Branded. Burned in. "You're new," he said. "Nobody drinks the wall water twice." "Then I'm glad I met you between the first time and the second." Kairos Vale. Ren. A pause, defiant. Kagesawa. My mom's name. She got dropped when I was 9, so whatever's left of it is mine now. He slid down the coral, keeping the pry bar between us. Up close, he moved like the kids I used to see in the worst calls of my old job, the ones who'd learned that adults are a weather system, and weather is survived, not trusted. "You fell today? You got anything? Rations, cord, alloy?" "Shackle cuffs, half a prison jumpsuit, and a leg I wouldn't sell you at full price." He snorted, despite himself. Then his eyes did the thing everyone's eyes were going to do from now on, I realized. Flicked up above my head, hunting for the color mark that every soul under the lattice wore like a hat. Finding nothing. Finding gray absence. "You're a null," he whispered and stepped back. "Protocol 7. They dropped a null. You're the reason squads come down." "Squads?" "Bureau kill teams. When a null falls, they follow it down inside a week and burn a whole terrace to make sure it's dead. Last time it was Sable Shelf. 200 people lived there." His knuckles were white on the bar. "You're a walking purge order, mister." 200 people. Filed under field stability. Somewhere above us, Damien Ashford believed the ceiling was a kindness. "Then let's be efficient," I said. "You know this terrace. I know nothing. Teach me what keeps me alive, and when the squad comes, I'll make sure I'm standing very far away from anyone you care about. That's the deal I've got." He stared at me. "That's a garbage deal." "It's an honest garbage deal, and I'll owe you. Where I come from, I paid my debts." He weighed the pry bar, and me, and whatever arithmetic keeps a 14-year-old alive in a place like this. "The last null they dropped," he said. "We found him on day 2. He'd painted himself with luminous moss and was preaching to the snow that he was the field's judgment. The squad found him on day 5. You going to go like that? Preachy?" "I'm told I'm more of a listener." "Everyone's a listener till the dark starts talking back." But the bar came down off his shoulder, and hunger did the negotiating. His crew scraped by on what raid teams dropped, and an extra pair of adult hands, even attached to a bad leg and a death mark, was capital. He led me down a switchback trail, rattling off survival rules in the flat sing-song of a boy who'd recited them to newcomers before and watched most of them die anyway. Never follow lights that blink in rhythm. Sleep behind salt lines. If the wind starts smelling like lilacs, hold your breath and get above it. And them? I nodded at the drifting soul motes. Ren's face closed. "Don't touch the snow. It's sticky. You get a mote on your skin, it starts whispering. And then you walk off an edge, smiling." He glanced at me sidelong. "Why? They doing something to you? They cluster on some people." They were clustering on me. They had been for an hour. A slow, polite orbit. Dozens of pale motes trailing me down the switchbacks like gulls behind a ship. Not sticking. Waiting. Soul analysis level 1 to level 2. Passive perception expanded. You can now hear residual intent. And with the level, sound. The snow was murmuring. Not the predatory whisper Ren feared. This was fainter and infinitely sadder. Fragments. "Didn't get to tell her. The ledger's still under the floorboard. Cold. Why is it? My daughter's classification. Did she pass? Did she?" 1,000 unfinished sentences, falling, forever. The grid above measured what a soul could produce. It had never once asked what a soul wanted. And down here, at the bottom of their beautiful machine, the wanting drifted on, with nowhere to land. I had a talent whose entire text was a promise. Boundless summoning. Contract limit? None. Summoning range? All worlds. I'd assumed, when the words first scrolled behind my eyes, that it meant hauling monsters out of magic circles. Standing in the falling snow of the discarded dead, I understood it differently. A summoner is someone who calls, and to call is to say, you have somewhere to land. Ren, I said, if a squad's coming inside a week, I need to stop being helpless in less than that. I'm going to try something tonight. You'll want to stand back. He backed up 2 full steps. What are you going to do? I looked up, not at the scar of the lattice, past it, in the direction of a highway on a world whose name has no letters here, and then down at the endless snowfall of everyone this world had thrown away. I'm going to answer the phone, I said. That night, behind Ren's salt line, on a shelf of warm stone at the top of the longest dark in the world, I sat with my hands open on my knees and took stock of what I actually knew about my own talent, which was 1 screen's worth of words read while falling. Boundless summoning. Grade? Ultra. Contract limit? None. Summoning range? All worlds. Summoned souls scale with summoner. 4 lines, and every one of them was a door with something enormous behind it. Contract limit? None. The grid's licensed summoners, I'd learned in my 4 months of listening, held 2 contracts, 3 for the S-ranked, 5 for the 1 white-rank arch-summoner in the capital, because each contract was a standing cost against a soul's fixed capacity. Fixed. There it was again. Every rule of this world had the same word load-bearing at the bottom of it, and my record was the only one where that word was missing. All worlds, with Origin World included in the full text, which I had been very deliberately not thinking about, because the idea that I could reach back toward Earth was too large to hold while also splinting a leg. And scale with Summoner, meaning nothing I called would ever be locked at the strength of its death. Meaning a contract with me wasn't preservation, it was a second lifetime of growth. The grid had handed the keys of an unlimited engine to the 1 soul it couldn't read, then thrown the engine down a hole to be rid of it. There was a theology in there somewhere. Sato would laugh about it later. That night, alone, I just found it useful. So, reach for the skill the way you reach for a dial tone. Requires a willing soul, an open channel, an honest offer. An honest offer. Not serve me, not obey. The skill would not carry a lie. I could feel that in its grain, the way you can feel that a rope won't hold a knot tied wrong. What did I have to offer the dead? The same thing I'd offered for 9 years on the other end of an emergency line. I hear you. You are not alone in the dark. Stay with me. I opened the channel, and 10 points of uncapped mana went out of me like breath onto cold glass. And I spoke the only summons I knew. Not an incantation, just the truth. Cast outward in every direction at once, into the abyss and past it, into the gap between worlds where I myself had once drifted. To anyone who was thrown away, to anyone the measuring missed. I have nothing yet, no house, no rank, no army. But I'm building a place where the unread go to matter, and there is a ceiling here in need of breaking. If that sounds like a reason to exist again, take my hand. For 3 heartbeats, nothing. Then, every soul mote on the terrace stopped falling. The snow hung frozen mid-air, a million pale sparks, all turning toward me at once like a stadium of faces. And far below, deeper than the blue-green veins, deeper than shelves and ledges. The vast sleeping pressure turned over again, and this time it did not go back to sleep. And directly in front of me, one soul, bright, dense, sword-shaped, burning with an intent so fierce my new skill rendered it in a single word, unfinished, fell out of the frozen snow like a meteor, landed on the stone, and began, furiously, to take the shape of a woman. Contract request received. Finally, do you know how long I've been falling, Summoner? Speak. Was that offer true? Every word, I said. The light condensed, into edges, into shoulders, into a scarred hand reaching for a sword hilt that wasn't there yet. Then bind me, she said, before I remember how to doubt. Chapter 3. The First Contract. Forging a contract, it turns out, is not like signing one. It's like surgery, performed on both parties at once, with honesty for a scalpel. The moment the channel closed between us, her life came through it. Not as a story told, as weight transferred. I staggered under 31 years that were not mine. A childhood in the sword halls of House Amasaki. A girl drilling forms at 4 in the morning because her blue classification said soldier and the glass did not lie. A battlefield promotion. A silver-threaded officer handing down an order to seal a mining district's gates with 3,000 gray-branded workers still inside because a field fluctuation made their sector statistically unstable. And then the refusal. One word in front of the whole command line. No. They hadn't even executed her angrily. That was the detail that came through sharpest. The administrative calm of it. The paperwork, her own house affixing its seal to the disposal order, to show the Bureau there were no hard feelings. She'd gone off the platform at the gates of the abyss with her hands unbound, at her own request, and her house had granted the request because it cost nothing. 30 years of falling, 30 years of watching the snow of the dead drift past, holding herself together by pure refusal, while lesser souls frayed into whispers, with one sentence for a spine. I was right, and the ceiling was wrong. One memory arrived sharper than all the others, because she had spent 30 years keeping it sharp. The mining district. Standing at the gate controls, with the seal order glowing on her gauntlet, and below the gantry, 3,000 gray-branded faces turned up toward her. Not screaming yet, because they didn't know yet. Because gray workers were never told anything until it was done to them. A girl on the near scaffold, 16 maybe, had actually waved at her. At the uniform, at the blue rank that was supposed to mean protector, because that was the story the grid told about its soldiers, and the girl still believed it. Yui had looked at the wave, and the order, and the mathematics of a field fluctuation that some white-ranked actuary had priced at 3,000 lives against a 2% stability margin. No. They gave her 3 chances to withdraw it, because House Amasaki's honor was implicated, and houses protect their honor the way they protect nothing else. 3 times, in front of the command line, in front of her own uncle wearing the house crest, no, no, and chiffed. When they read the disposal order aloud with her mother's countersignature on it. No. And you knew it was wrong when you signed, which is why your hand shook. The gates had been sealed by the next officer in line, of course. It had taken him 4 seconds. The girl on the scaffold had still been waving. That was what I inherited in the forging chift. Not just the memory, but the weight of it. The 30-year-old unfinished no still burning in her like a pilot light. The skill had said, a contract needs an honest offer. I finally understood the transaction from her side. I wasn't offering her existence. I was offering her the pending half of that sentence. The transfer worked both ways. She got mine. The highway, the blood, the dispatcher's headset, the dark between worlds. I heard her breath catch as it landed. "You're not from anywhere," she said. Her voice had finished forming before her body had. It came out of the condensing light, low and precise, a blade being drawn slowly. "There's no grid in you at all. No color. No brand." A sound that was almost a laugh. They threw away the one soul their machine will never digest. Fools. The light collapsed inward and became a woman standing on the stone. She looked exactly 31 and exactly like her death. Field uniform of a style 30 years out of date, with the House Amasaki crest torn off. She'd torn it herself mid-fall, I now knew. Black hair cut sword short, a pale scar through her left eyebrow, and eyes the color of the lattice seen from below. When she flexed her hand, mana condensed along her palm and became a katana with a smoke-gray blade. Not summoned steel. Remembered steel. Her soul had simply refused to forget its weapon. Amasaki Yui, blade of the unfinished bond. Soul deep. Scaling, linked to summoner. "Amasaki Yui," she said, and knelt. Not the way soldiers kneel to lords, but the way they kneel to check a wounded man's pulse, briskly, at eye level with my bad leg. "Your knee is fractured, and your ribs are cracked, and you have 10 mana, and you fed 9 of them to my summoning. You are, objectively, the weakest master in the recorded history of the grid. The record is exactly 1 entry long, so I'm also the strongest." She looked up at me. The scar over her eyebrow moved a millimeter, which I would come to learn was her entire smile. "Ren is watching us from behind the salt line with his bar raised," she said, "and there is a bone mantis stalking his blind side along the coral shelf. 60 meters. May I begin working?" The mantis was dead before I finished saying yes. I didn't even see the middle of it. Just Yui unbecoming from beside me, and then a white arc in the darkness, and a sound like a scythe through a harp, and something the size of a horse folding onto the stone in 2 pieces, its edges dissolving into gray light that drifted toward me, into me. Mana 1 to 4. Residual soul density absorbed. Soul analysis, level 2 to level 3. And Ren, screaming a curse and falling backward over his own salt line, staring at the woman who now stood on the mantis's corpse, flicking gray ichor off a blade that had not existed 4 minutes ago. "You," he said to me from the ground, in the voice of a boy revising his entire cosmology at speed. "You called one. You called one of the snow people, and she..." "Amasaki Yui," said Yui. "That's a house name. That's a main branch house name." It was. Now it's mine, and the house can come down here and take it back whenever they find the courage. She sheathed the katana into nothing, the blade folded away into her palm like light going out, and looked at the boy's branded hand, and something in her posture changed. The soldier stayed. Something older than the soldier stepped forward and stood beside it. "You keep salt lines, and you know the wind rules. Who taught you? Your mother?" Ren's jaw worked. "Until they dropped her." "Then she's in the snow," Yui said, matter of fact, merciless, gentle. "Somewhere below us, still falling. They all are, boy. Nothing down here ever finishes dying. The grid built it that way on purpose." She turned to me, and the question she asked was the question of a woman planting a flag. "He should hear it plainly, Master. Say what you're for." They both looked at me. The snow of the dead drifted past the shelf, murmuring its unfinished sentences, and far overhead the lattice field lay silver and serene across the top of the dark, a ceiling pretending to be a sky. Up there, they measure what a soul can produce and burn what they can't measure, I said. I'm going to build the other thing. A place that starts where their scale ends, where the nulls and the grays and the thrown away land and matter and count. I'm going to fill it with everyone they ever dropped. And when it's strong enough, I'm going to walk it back up to the gates and make the grid read us again. Silence. Then Ren, hoarse. That's insane. You're 3 people and a fractured knee. Every world I've lived in was built by 3 people and a bad leg, I said. The trick is that nobody warns the ceiling. We moved before dawn. The abyss has no dawn, but the body keeps its own, and Ren swore his crew's bolt hole on the next terrace down was defensible. Yui took point. Watching her move through the black coral was an education in what scaling with the summoner meant. She was, she informed me flatly, at perhaps a 20th of her living strength, capped by my pitiful mana pool, and she had still bisected an apex predator of the upper terraces in one stroke. She used the march to train me, because Yui regarded an unused hour the way other people regard an open wound. Mana is breath, she said, not slowing. The grid teaches its ranks to hoard it because their cups are fixed, and a spent cup is a dead soldier. Yours refills from wherever it is you refill from, which I felt during the forging and would prefer not to discuss in the dark. So you will learn the opposite doctrine. Spend, circulate, push it through the bond to me in a wave and pull it back. Now. I pushed. Somewhere ahead of us, her outline sharpened. The vein light caught her edges harder. Her footfalls went silent. I pulled back, and the returning mana came changed, carrying a faint taste of steel and drill yards, and my soul analysis pinged softly, as if I'd done a push-up. Again, said Yui. 100 times before we reach the bunker. The bond is a muscle, master. Every one you forge after me will be born stronger for every hour you spend working this one. Also, your circulation is sloppy on the pull. You gather mana like a man raking leaves in the wind. I've been a mage for 1 day. And I have been your sword for 1 day, and already dislike the eulogy where I explain you died of sloppy pulls. A flicker down the bond. Dry, wry. The ghost of a barracks humor 30 years unpracticed. 100 times. Count aloud if it helps. When you were alive, I asked, on push 30-something, mostly to have something other than the burn to think about. How strong? Blue rank, 3rd decoration. Captain of the left sword. A pause, longer than her pauses usually ran. But I died refusing, and I fell 30 years without fraying, and the fall tempers what it doesn't break. I am better steel now than I ever was alive, master. What I lack is the arm to swing me. She glanced back at me, eyes catching the blue-green vein light. Feed the bond. Every soul you gather feeds it. I want to be there, at my full edge, on the day you make House Amasaki hear my name read back off your unreadable ledger. Noted, I said. Also, you can just call me Kairos. No, she said serenely, and kept walking. The bolt hole was a dead raid team bunker wedged in a coral fissure, and Ren's crew turned out to be 4 children younger than him and 1 ancient hurricane lamp. He was embarrassed about it. I felt him getting smaller as we approached, bracing for the adult verdict on what he'd built. What he'd built was a functioning salt perimeter, a water catch with a razor eel filter woven from wire, a ration ledger scratched on the wall in tally marks with every mouth accounted for, and 4 children who were alive in the abyss, which is a sentence most licensed raid captains couldn't write. The eldest after Ren was 11. The youngest was Hana. It's not much, Ren said, chin up, daring me. Ren, I said, I've worked disaster relief on 2 worlds now, and this is the best-run shelter I've seen on either. Which was true, and he needed a second to figure out what to do with his face about it. The children stared at Yui like she was a story that had walked in out of the snow, which she was. The smallest, a girl maybe 7, with dark, serious eyes and a burn-scarred throat that explained her silence, walked straight up to me, past Yui's blade, past every survival rule Ren had ever drilled into her, and put her hand flat on my chest, over the place where the contracts lived. Hana, gray-branded, mute, soul density, anomalous, high. She looked up at me, and then she pointed, at me, at the drifting snow outside the fissure, at me again, and raised her eyebrows in the oldest question in the world. Can you really? Yeah, I said quietly. Anyone. That's the whole talent, sweetheart. Anyone who was ever thrown away. Hana studied my face the way children study adults who make large claims, with the unblinking audit of someone who has been lied to by professionals. Then she nodded once, approved, turned around, sat down against my bad leg like a small, warm sandbag, and went to sleep. Over her head, Yui met my eyes. 6 days until a kill team follows you down, she said. 6 days, 10 mana, 1 blade, and a bunker full of children. 5 days, Ren corrected miserably, from the doorway. The wind smelled like silver on the way in. They're rigging the drop platforms early. I looked around the lamp-lit fissure, at the boy with his mother's name, at the sleeping girl with the anomalous soul, at the swordswoman 30 years dead and sharper for it, at the pale snow of everyone the ceiling had ever discarded, falling past the doorway with nowhere to land. 10 mana. No limit anywhere in the record. Then we'd better start summoning, I said. Chapter 4. The Gray Market. There is a marketplace at the bottom of the world, and it runs on everything except money. Ren led us there on the second day, down a rope and bone stairway his crew paid toll on, through a coral gullet wide enough for 2 people or 1 story, out onto a terrace where the blue-green veins in the rock had been coaxed and channeled and split until the whole shelf glowed like a drowned city. The Gray Market. Perhaps 400 souls, escaped convicts, gray brands, children of the dropped, raid team deserters, trading water rights and salt and monster leather and rumors under strings of stolen lattice light, in the one place in the world where nobody looked above your head to see what color you were worth. Nobody looked above mine either. That lasted 4 minutes. Null, someone whispered, and the word went through the market the way cold goes through wet clothes. Stalls closed. Mothers appeared from nowhere to collect children. By the time we reached the center of the shelf, we walked in a moving circle of emptiness 10 meters wide, and the only person left inside it with us was an old man sitting cross-legged on a mat, sorting dried lilac moss into piles by touch. His eyes were the milk white of a man 20 years blind. His face was aimed directly at me. "So," he said, "the week's bad wind has a name. Sit, Protocol 7. You're scaring my customers, and my tea gets bitter when it's ignored." "You know what I am." "I know what they wrote you down as, which is a different library entirely." He poured tea into a cup carved from a vertebra, unhurried. "Sato. I sell moss, salt, and the weather. Sit." I sat. Yui did not sit. Yui stood at my shoulder reading the crowd, and I felt through the bond her professional note. Rooftop, 2 crossbows, 1 thrown spear, None of them decided yet. Old Man Sato aimed his white eyes at her next, and his eyebrows climbed. "And you've a dead woman standing guard. A whole one, not a whisper. 30 years of snow walk past my mat, and none of it ever walked back down its own footprints before." He sipped. "You called her out of the fall." That's the rumor running the stairways since yesterday, and I dismissed it because I am old and wise. Say it plain, boy. Can you do it for others? The circle of emptiness around us had become a circle of listening. 400 people, every one of them with somebody in the snow. "Yes," I said. "Willing souls only. Honest terms only. And I won't lie to you, my mana's a puddle. I can bring back 1, maybe 2 before I'm dry, and each one I raise makes the Bureau want this terrace dead a little more. That's the whole truth. Trade on it as you like." Silence. Then Sato laughed, a dry, delighted sound, like a door long rusted shut, swinging open. "Honest terms," he repeated. "In the gray market. Oh, you'll do damage." He set down his cup and raised his voice. Not much, but the shelf carried it. "Stall's open. He drinks my tea, he's weather. And weather you work with." Not everyone agreed with the old man's meteorology. A man shouldered out of the crowd before the stalls had finished reopening. Big, scarred, in the salvaged half-plate of a raid team deserter, with the particular swagger of someone who has been the strongest thing on his terrace long enough to mistake it for a law of nature. Broker, I'd learn later. He ran protection on the rope tires and took his percentage in everything. "The Bureau posts bounties on nulls," Broker announced, to the market more than to me. "Live delivery to the Gates winch. Enough alloy to buy this whole shelf twice." He let that sit, then smiled down at me. "Nothing personal. It's just arithmetic. 1 stranger against 400 of us. Even your honest terms have to respect that math." "They do," I said. "It's good math. Here's mine." I didn't stand up. Standing up is what he wanted. Hostage calls teach you never to give the room the scene it's braced for. Deliver me, and the bounty comes down on the winch. And so does the kill team. They followed the winch record. It's how they audit. You'll have alloy for 1 season and a purged terrace by spring. Or, I stay, and every family here gets a chance at pulling their dead out of the snow. You've got someone in the snow, Broker. Everyone down here does. Which arithmetic do you want to explain to the market? The one where you got paid, or the one where their dead stayed dead because of you? The market had gone very quiet. Broker's jaw worked through several futures. Beside me, without fuss, Yui had begun cleaning her nails with a knife that had not existed a moment earlier, in the manner of a woman entirely uninvolved in the conversation. "The snow summoning's real?" Broker said finally, and his voice cracked a fraction on it. And in the crack, I heard a name he wasn't saying. There's always a name. "Ask me again tomorrow," I said, "and bring who you lost." He didn't deliver me to the winch. Tomorrow, he brought a name instead. A brother, 12 years fallen, and the market pretended very hard not to watch him do it. Sato poured tea through the whole exchange, blind eyes aimed at nothing, wearing the expression of a man watching his weather forecast land. And to me, lo, while the market noise came grudgingly back to life around us, the old man had said one more thing that first day. "The kill team drops in 3 days, not 5. I sell weather, remember." My price for the correction is this. 4th stall on the rope tier. There's a woman who's been paying me in silence for 6 years to keep a name alive. Go hear the name. The woman at the 4th stall was a leather worker with forearms like cable, and a daughter 20 years in the snow. And I will keep the rest of what she said between us, because some contracts begin long before the summoner arrives. But the name she kept alive was not her daughter's. Kanzaki Mire, she said, the saint of the ninth descent. Every old-timer down here owes her a limb or a lung. She was a healer with the licensed raid teams, green rank, nothing special on paper, but paper never met her. When the ninth descent collapsed, she stayed under the falling shelf with the trapped ones, wouldn't leave wounded. The house that ran the raid wrote her off as equipment lost. The leather worker's hands kept working the whole time she talked, the way hands do when the words are too heavy to carry alone. 22 years ago. If any soul in the snow is still whole, it's her. She was too stubborn to fray. Bring the saint back, null, and this market is yours. Half of us are alive because of her. That night, on the rope tier with the market's lights banked low, I opened the channel again and sent the call down. Not broadcast this time, but aimed. A name attached. Kanzaki Mide. There are wounded up here. It's a mess. We could use you. She answered before I finished the sentence, the way she must have answered every call in her life, and her soul came up through 22 years of dark, like a lamp being carried up a stair. Wounded, you said. How many? What supplies? Oh. You're the null everyone below is whispering about. Kanzaki Mide, saint of the ninth descent, mana 12-3. She condensed into being small and round-faced and gray-streaked, in a raid medic's coat with the house sigil unpicked thread by thread. She'd done it during the fall, same as Yui. And I begin to think the fall is where this world's honest souls finally get time for needlework. She looked at me, then at my leg, and clicked her tongue with a disappointment so maternal that Yui, 30 years a soldier, straightened her posture on reflex. You walked to a market on that knee? Said the saint of the ninth descent. Sit down. All of you sit down. Nobody in this crew has eaten a vegetable in years. I can smell it. Green light rolled off her hands, and my fracture knit with a sound like ice thawing. And somewhere in the watching dark, 400 people saw the null pay his first trade. By morning, there was a line at Sato's mat, and it was not for moss. Mide worked it like a shift. That's the only way to describe it. She commandeered a stall awning, had Ren rig a curtain for dignity, and ran the gray market's first clinic in living memory. Lungs full of coral dust, old brakes set wrong, a cataract, a breech pregnancy that had the whole rope tier holding its breath for an hour and then weeping. She healed until my mana ran to fumes, rationed herself without being asked, and kept up a stream of scolding the entire time. You climbed with this shoulder? For how many years? That the market drank like fresh water. Being scolded, I realized, watching a scarred old deserter grin through it, was a luxury. Scolding means someone expects you to live long enough for it to matter. You're spending your whole pool on my clinic, she said to me at the end of it, sharp, quiet, while she repacked instruments that dissolved into light as she stowed them. Don't think I can't feel it. You could be raising a second sword instead. You are the second sword, I said. Yui cuts things. You're cutting 20 years of the grid doesn't come down here, out of 400 people at once. I couldn't buy what you're doing with 10 summons. She looked at me for a moment, this small, round, gray-streaked woman who had spent 22 years dead rather than leave the wounded, and then went back to her packing at double speed, the way certain people do when the alternative is being caught feeling something. Eat the moss soup, was all she said. You're 2 kilos under, and I know what a summoner burning body fat smells like. I couldn't summon for the line. 3 mana, then 5, then 8. The pool crawled upward with each passing hour, and each dissolved monster core Yui fed the bond. But a summoning of a whole soul cost 9, 10, more. What I could do was listen. So I sat by the mat, and one by one the people of the gray market told me their names in the snow. A brother, a wife, A whole work crew sealed behind Yui's own house's gates 30 years ago. And I wrote each one into memory with the care I once gave to addresses shouted over bad phone lines. And to each person, I said the same thing. Not yet. But they're on the ledger now. Nobody on the ledger stays in the snow. You're making promises, Yui said quietly at the end of the second day. That will take a decade to keep. I know. That's what a ledger is. Good, she said. A decade is short. I once waited 30 years for a stranger to say hello. And she almost smiled. The scar moved a full 2 millimeters and went back to drilling Ren, whom she had conscripted at some point nobody could identify, and who now held a salvaged short blade like it might bite him, under the patient, milk-white gaze of old Sato and the fierce, silent supervision of Hana. Hana, who on the third evening, the last evening, though we didn't know the hour yet, tugged my sleeve, pointed at the market's strung lights, at the people under them, at the snow beyond, and then did something new. She pointed at herself, then cupped both small hands around an imaginary something and lifted it, offering, "You want to help me summon?" She shook her head with the crushing patience of a child correcting a slow adult, pointed at herself again, at my chest, where the contracts lived, at herself, at my chest. Me too, when it's time. I'm one of yours. Anomalous soul density, my skill had said, day one. I looked at this 7-year-old the grid had branded worthless, who could not speak and had never once needed to, and I felt the shape of a distant future turn over, the way the deep pressure below had turned over at my first call. You're already on the ledger, Hana, I said. Page 1. Later that evening, while the market banked its lights toward sleep, I brought Sato his emptied cup back and asked him the question I'd been carrying since my first hour on the shelf. The thing at the bottom. It moved when I made my first call. What is it? The old man was quiet long enough that I thought the blind eyes had gone to sleep open. When I could still see, he said at last, I ran with a deep raid crew, licensed. We went below the 9th descent once, only crew in a generation to try it. The blue veins stop down there, did you know? Not fade. Stop. In a line. Like a border someone drew. And past the line, the dark is administrative. He turned the word over like a stone he'd kept in his pocket for 40 years. Curated. The snow falls in lanes, boy. Something down there sorts it. The old Greys have a name for it that predates the bureau, predates the houses, maybe predates the lattice itself. The warden. And the prayer that goes with the name isn't spare us, it's do not notice us. He held out his hand for the cup, and his voice went mild again, which was somehow worse. Your first night here, every soul on 6 terraces turned in one direction, toward you. I sell weather, Protocol 7. That night, the weather changed for the first time since I went blind. And I've been sitting at this mat ever since, waiting to find out which kind of storm you are. And your professional opinion? My professional opinion, Sato said, is that the grid built a machine to measure souls. The machine grew a mouth at the bottom, and the houses feed it and call the feeding stability. And that nothing about that arrangement survives contact with a man whose souls can't be digested. He smiled, milk-white eyes aimed just past my shoulder at the falling snow. Get some sleep, boy. Storms need their rest. She nodded, obviously, and sat down against my leg, proprietary. And that is exactly where she was sitting when every stolen light in the gray market flickered at once, when Sato's head came up like a hound's, when Mirei's healing light snapped out mid-word, and Yui's blade came out of nothing at all, aimed straight up. Far overhead, at the silver scar of the gates, 7 drop platforms had swung out over the dark. Soul Analysis Level 3. Descending. 40 souls. Armed. Intent. Purge. Weather, said old Sato into the ringing quiet and drained his tea. Early. Chapter 5. Protocol 7. 40 soldiers take a long time to descend a kilometer of dark, and the gray market spent that time proving it had survived 20 purges before this one. There was no panic. There was procedure. Hard-learned, blood-priced procedure. Stall lights went dark in banks, in a sequence, so that from above the market would look like a settlement dying of fuel shortage rather than one going to ground. Children and the lame went down the rope tiers into the coral gullets, Mide moving among them with her green light banked low, triaging the evacuation like she'd never spent a day dead. Ren knew every bolt hole on the shelf and spent himself hoarse guiding people into them. Broker, of all people, stood at the gullet mouths with his half-plate on, counting heads against the ration ledgers, because a man who runs protection rackets knows exactly who lives where, and tonight, that was the most valuable knowledge on the shelf. Yui found me at the tea mat and gave her report the way she must have given 1,000. Flat, fast, complete. 40 is 2 squads of 16 plus command elements. Standard purge doctrine is a burn line swept shelf to shelf. They'll anchor on the winch head, so the eastern tiers go first. I can hold the choke point against 16 at current strength. Not against 40, and not in the open. A beat. Doctrine also says they carry seeker motes keyed to your null signature. Hiding you among the evacuees kills the evacuees. I know. I know you know. I'm establishing for the record that the plan where you hand yourself over is tactically illiterate. Before you say it aloud and I have to be insubordinate on our 4th day. And so I stood at Sato's cold tea mat, doing the arithmetic of a man who has brought the weather down on 400 people. They're not here for the market, I said. They're here for me. If I walk out to the far shelf and stand somewhere visible, they'll burn the market anyway, Sato said, mild as ever, packing his moss unhurried. You're the reason for the trip, boy, not the itinerary. Protocol 7 isn't an execution, it's a harvest schedule. You think 40 men drop a kilometer to kill 1 null? They drop to kill a null and clear the terrace and drive the seasoned souls down into the deep, where the snow drifts to. Same as every purge. His blind eyes aimed at me, and for the first time, his voice had edges. Nobody asks where the snow drifts to, boy. Not even down here. Start asking. The deep pressure below us, turning over in its sleep at my first call. A drain, I'd thought, day 1. Drains lead somewhere. Harvests feed someone. I didn't get to ask. The first squad hit the shelf. They came down on shrike lines, fast roping out of the dark in bureau gray, and the market's outer lights died under precision crossbow fire, and a voice amplified by rank sigil rolled across the terrace with the boredom of ritual. By directive of the Bureau of Classification, this settlement is designated unstable. Surrender the null-designated Kairos Vale. Compliance will be recorded. Recorded, not rewarded. Even their mercy was just filing. I stepped out into the open with my hands visible, because every hostage negotiation begins with someone volunteering to be the interesting thing in the room. And the squad's lights converged on me, and their commander walked out of the glare. Big man, 40-ish, a yellow ranks brand and a sergeant's plain iron on him. No house silver anywhere. He moved like Yui moved, and stopped out of blade range of empty air, which meant he was the only one on that shelf who'd guessed she existed before she did. His rifle stayed lowered. Caleb Rourke, he said. Bureau retrieval. You're the null. Kairos Vale. You're early. The weather promised 3 days. Board moved us up. His eyes did the flick, above my head, finding gray absence, and something in his face tightened. Not fear, distaste, and not aimed at me. Board wants it done loud this time. New oversight. Some house prince flew down to the gates to watch the feed personally. He said feed like a man spitting a seed. Listen to me. I've done 6 of these. Come quiet, and I have discretion on the settlement. My report reads, terrace found abandoned. That's the best deal that exists down here tonight, and it expires when my captain's squads finish flanking, which is soon. Through the bond, Yui from the dark. He's honest. And there's a second signature on the flank. Silver thread. House trained. Moving wrong for bureau. His captain isn't his. You've done 6 of these, I said. Sergeant, where do you think the souls go? The question hit him somewhere pre-existing, and I watched a 6-purge-old crack widen a millimeter. Back to the color, he recited, flat. There's a hole at the bottom of this world, and your board schedules its meals. And tonight, the menu is me and 400 grays. I can show you the ledger math, or you can keep saying back to the color until it stops working. Your call, but make it fast, because your flank isn't yours. And it wasn't. The silver-threaded captain didn't wait for Rourke's signal. The far stalls went up in white house fire. No warning. Contract be damned. And I heard children scream in the gullets, and heard Rourke roar, "Hold! That's not the directive!" into a command channel that had already stopped listening to him. The market's dark exploded into shrike lines and crossbow light. So I did the only thing I've ever been good at, on any world. I opened every channel I had, and I called. Not down, into the snow. There was no mana in me for a new soul tonight. Myri had cost me the pool. I called into the 2 contracts I already held, and I pushed, and I learned in one white instant what uncapped actually meant. The pool has a floor at 0, but the channel has no walls at all. Mana isn't the water. Mana was never the water. It's just the cup. And a soul that came from outside the grid's whole architecture can pour straight from the aquifer. Output exceeds rated capacity. No rated capacity found. Limiter released. The dark of the gray market lit up gray-white, and House Amasaki's discarded blade stepped out of it at half her living strength for the first time in 30 years. I won't pretend I saw the next 90 seconds clearly. The bond saw it for me, and what the bond recorded, I own forever. I saw arcs. I saw shrike lines parting mid-air cleanly, and armored men lowered, not dropped, onto stone with the tendons of their trigger hands opened, and nothing else. Because 30 years of falling had burned everything out of Yui except precision and the refusal. And the refusal extended even to killing conscripts who were only guilty of believing the story she'd once believed. Through the bond, her focus was a blade-flat calm, with one hairline crack of joy in it. At last, the arm to swing me. She took a crossbow bolt through the shoulder rather than let it pass to a fleeing stall-keeper behind her, and the bond flared white. And I learned that a summoner feels his people's wounds like debts entered in his own ledger. I saw white housefire bend around a green dome as Mireille stood over the gullet mouths and outright refused, the way she'd refused a falling shelf 22 years ago. And this time, the shelf blinked first. Her voice carried through the dome to the men shooting at her. And it wasn't a battle cry. It was, unmistakably, a diagnosis. Dehydration, coral lung, and whoever set that man's arm should lose a license. When this is over, form a line. I saw Ren drag a wounded market guard out of the light, screaming and swearing and doing it anyway. 14 years old, gray-branded, worth more than the house that priced him. and I saw Hana standing in the bunker door where she'd been told to hide, palms out, eyes shut, mouthing something silent and enormous, while the drifting soul snow above the whole battlefield slowly, impossibly, began to spiral around her like a held breath. My soul analysis looked at her and returned, for the second time, a single unhelpful word: anomalous. The snow wasn't threatening her. The snow was listening to her, the way it had listened to my first call. And no one had forged her any contract, and no one had granted her any talent. And somewhere in the back of my burning mind, a note was filed in permanent ink. The grid missed something in the grays. The grid has been missing it for 1,000 years. And I saw Sergeant Caleb Rourke put his rifle on the stone, put his knee beside it, and put both hands on his head, eyes locked on the silver-threaded captain across the burning market. A man choosing, in the middle of 6 purges worth of widening crack, which report he was willing to live in. 11 of his 16 put their rifles down with him. That's the thing about honest sergeants the houses never learn until it's expensive. Soldiers don't follow directives. Soldiers follow the man who reads the directives aloud. The fighting guttered out around that kneeling silence, the way fire gutters when the fuel is spent. 5 of the captain's own men were down. Yui's work, tendons and pride. Nothing that wouldn't heal into a story. The eastern stalls burned. Mirei's dome came down, and she was already moving toward the bureau, wounded, which broke something load-bearing in several watching soldiers. I could see it happen. The captain saw all of it too, and smiled, and spoke into his house channel, distinct above the dying noise, words meant to be overheard. Confirmed, my Lord Ashford. The Null has military-grade summons and local collaborators. Recommend escalation to Protocol 1. Yes, my lord. Wake the warden. Captain! Rourke was on his feet, hands still empty, voice gone very careful. The voice of a man talking a colleague back from a ledge. Protocol 1 is a containment failure directive. There's no containment failure here. You'd be invoking a field-level weapon on a market shelf over one null and a settled dispute. Sergeant Rourke, the captain said pleasantly, you knelt to a Protocol 7 subject on a recorded feed. Your career concluded 90 seconds ago. I'd stand very still if I were you. And to the air, to the silver thread of his house channel, with the satisfaction of a man whose evening has gone exactly to plan. Authorization confirmed. Which is when I understood, late, far too late, what the early drop, the loud directive, the House Prince watching the feed personally had actually been. Nobody sends 40 men to kill one null. Ashford hadn't sent a kill team. He'd sent a provocation, wrapped in one, with a camera attached. He'd needed me to do exactly what I'd done, reveal the summons, flip a bureau squad, demonstrate on a recorded feed that the null was a system-level threat, because Protocol 1 required evidence, and evidence required a performance, and I had delivered mine with both hands. The ceiling is a kindness veil. He'd told me who he was at the platform rail, gently, in full daylight. The most dangerous people in any world are the merciful ones with clean math, and I'd gone and become a variable worth solving. Every vein of blue-green light in the rock went out at once. The abyss holds a great many sounds: wind, whispers, the harp note of Yui's blade. What came up from underneath us, from below the last terrace, from the place the snow drifts down to, was not a sound. It was the withdrawal of sound, rising, the way water withdraws from a shore before the wave that matters. The soul snow across the entire visible dark stopped falling. Then it began streaming downward, a million pale motes ripped out of their 30-year drifts, pouring past us into the deep like the whole sky draining. The ledger in my chest, 2 contracts, 400 promises, pulled taut toward the dark below, and my own uncapped, unreadable, indigestible soul heard, from the bottom of the world's throat, the voice of the thing the grid had been feeding all along. It said one word. It said it the way I say it. Summoner. Around me, the battlefield had stopped being won. Bureau soldiers and market greys stood shoulder to shoulder without noticing they were doing it. Every face aimed down into the draining dark, united by the oldest classification of all, things that are prey together. The silver-threaded captain alone was smiling, backing toward his extraction line, his evening still on schedule. Yui arrived at my left shoulder, bleeding and unhurried, blade out. And through the bond came not fear, but a soldier's grim inventory. We are not ready for this. Note for the record, get ready faster. Midrei arrived at my right, green light kindling. Ren and Hana came anyway, of course. I felt them at my back before I heard them. One heartbeat furious. One heartbeat impossibly calm. And the word came again, up the emptied throat of the world. Curious now, tasting the shape of me. The one soul in its larder it had no lane for, calling contracts it could not digest, standing at the top of a snowfall 30 centuries deep. Summoner, you are outside the ledger. Yeah, I said, to the thing the ceiling had been feeding since before the houses had names, while my 2 contracts burned brighter down the bond than my body was strictly rated for, while 400 entries of my own ledger stood breathing behind me in the dark. I get that a lot. Let's talk about your collection. Old Sato exhaled beside me, packed away his last pile of moss, and stood up straighter than a blind moss peddler has any right to stand. Well, he said, now the weather's interesting.